The video lasted 19 seconds. Two security guards, a man in a flannel shirt, a push that wasn't quite a shove, but wasn't gentle either. The doors of a luxury showroom sliding shut behind a back that didn't turn around. 19 seconds. 4 million people watched it before lunch the next day. But that isn't where the story starts. The story starts 6 months later in a converted warehouse in Boyle Heights, where a man who used to wear a security badge is now teaching a young woman how to seat a piston ring. And it starts with a journalist named Sloane Whitaker, walking through a roll-up bay door at 8 in the morning, looking for the one piece of the story nobody had ever told. What follows is what she found. The fog hadn't lifted yet when Sloane parked her car a block from open garage foundation. Inside, 12 students were already at the workbench. They were watching the man at the head of it, holding a piston ring between his thumb and forefinger, like it was something that could break if he sneezed. Marcelus Thorne, 51. Salt and pepper hair clipped short, 28 years on the LAPD had stamped a permanent crease between his brows. He wore a navy blue mechanic's coverall now. Easy now, he was saying. You're not wrestling it, you're inviting it home. The young woman tried again, the ring slid in. He gave her a small nod. Just that. Sloane stood by the door and watched. She had been chasing this man through other people's words for 4 months. This was the first time she had stood in the same room as him. He saw her, wiped his hands on a rag, walked over. You must be the writer, Sloane Whitaker. He took her hand carefully, like he was worried about leaving a smudge. Coffee's in the back. It's not good, but it's hot. They sat at a folding card table. Sloane set her recorder between them and pressed the small red button when he nodded. Mr. Thorne, people around here have started calling this place the Belmont Heights Miracle. I'm not here for any of that. A man like you doesn't just decide one morning to leave a luxury showroom and start teaching kids how to rebuild engines. Something happened, know what? He stared at his coffee for a long moment. You sure you want the long version? I want the true version. He almost smiled. Not quite all right. But I have to start with me, because if you don't understand what kind of man I was that morning, the rest of it won't make sense. He took a sip, made a face, set the cup down. My father passed about 3 months before everything happened. Alzheimer's. He didn't recognize me at the end. I'd sit by his bed for hours and he'd call me by my brother's name. There I was every day, holding a man's hand who couldn't tell me hello. Sloane didn't write that down. She listened. My daughter Cassandra, she's 24. Her marriage came apart right around the time my father went into hospice. She moved back home. The night before that day at the showroom, she told me she was thinking about going back to him. The man who'd put her through hell. He shook his head. I didn't sleep that night. I came in to work the next morning angry at the whole world. And when a man like me walks in angry, with a badge on his chest and a radio on his hip, somebody is going to pay for it. I just hadn't picked who yet. Tell me about the showroom. Vandermere Luxury Motorworks. Belmont Heights. White marble floors so polished you could shave in them. Crystal lights overhead. Ducati Panagallas lined up like racehorses. Customers in tailored suits. Watches that cost more than my old patrol car. The whole place smelled like leather and money. And you fit in there? I fit in by being the wall between the ordinary people and the rich ones. 18 months I'd been there. The pay was 3 times what I'd ever made in uniform. That mattered to me. It mattered more than it should have. And the people you worked with? Brendalyn Hartwick, floor manager. 38. Sharp as a knife. She used to say to me, good security is security that sees through appearances. I used to be proud of that line. Now it haunts me. He paused. And Adelina Crestwood, the CEO, Harvard MBA, the kind of woman who could find a typo on page 17 of a financial report. She's the one who didn't fire me, after everything. I still don't fully understand why, Mr. Thorne. I want to ask you about the man in the video. He didn't answer right away. He turned his head toward the open bay door. Outside, an old arch motorcycle KRGT1 sat under a tarp. Miss Whitaker. You want to know the worst part of this whole story? It isn't that I treated a famous man badly. It isn't that the whole country saw me do it. The worst part is that I had treated hundreds of people exactly the same way before him. Veterans on disability who walked in just to look. Single mothers killing time before a bus. Construction workers on their lunch break who wanted to dream for 10 minutes before going back to a job site. I turned them all away, and not one of them had a camera pointed at them when I did it. Her pen stopped. That's the part nobody wants to print, because that part doesn't have a celebrity in it. That part is just a man with a badge and a radio, choosing to be cruel because he was too tired and too angry to be anything else. He looked at her. You came here looking for one story. There are hundreds. The man you're going to ask me about, he's just the one who finally made me see all the others. She picked up her pen again. Then take me back to that morning, Tuesday in April, 9:47 a.m. I was up on the mezzanine security office, hadn't slept, watching 22 monitors. Then the front door slid open. A man walked in alone, faded blue and grey flannel shirt, jeans worn pale at the knees, brown leather work boots. Canvas backpack, a black wool cap held loosely in one hand. Dark hair pulled back, short beard. He didn't look up at the cameras. He didn't look at the price tags. He walked slow, the way a man walks through a museum he's been waiting a long time to visit. The man stopped in front of the arch display. 3 arches on the floor that morning. 1 special build, KRGT1, serial number 003. Black tank, hand-stitched leather seat. The centerpiece of the entire showroom. He stood there for 2 minutes. Didn't touch it, didn't take a picture, just looked at it, and the longer he looked, the more I felt something turn sour in my stomach. Because nobody who couldn't afford that bike had any business standing in front of it that long. That's what I told myself. That's what I'd been telling myself for 18 months. Marcelus keyed his radio, called Brendalyn to the arch display. Unverified guest, please assess. I knew exactly what those words meant. Every member of my team knew. Unverified guest meant make him uncomfortable. Please assess meant get him out without a scene. We had a vocabulary, Miss Whitaker. A whole quiet language for moving certain people back toward the front door. Sloane's pen tightened. Brendalyn got there in under a minute. I watched her on monitor 7. He answered her politely, gave her a small nod, kept looking at the bike, didn't argue, didn't raise his voice. And that, more than anything, made me come downstairs. Why? Because in my head, a man who doesn't respond to a polite warning is a man who's up to something. That's what 28 years on the force teaches you. Or that's what I thought it taught me. The truth is, 28 years on the force taught me a lot of things, and some of them were useful, and a few of them were poison. I had stopped sorting which was which a long time before that morning. He set his cup down. I came down those stairs at 9:53. By 9:55, I had 2 of my guards walking with me across the floor. By 9:57, the man in the flannel shirt was no longer inside the building. Sloane's phone buzzed against the table. This is Brendalyn Hartwick. If you want my side of it, I'm in Pasadena. Coffee shop on Lake Avenue. I can be there in an hour. She turned the screen toward Marcelus. A small, weary smile crossed his face. You should go. Her story is different from mine. Before she left, she asked one last question. In all those minutes, did he ever say his name? Marcelus shook his head slowly. Not once. He never had to. We never even asked. We didn't think a man like him had a name worth asking for. The coffee shop on Lake Avenue was a narrow, brick-walled place. Sloane saw a woman sitting alone at a corner table. Heather grey sweater, dark slim trousers, a simple silver chain at her throat. Hair in a low knot, no makeup. She held a ceramic mug with both hands and looked out the window the way a person looks out a window when she is trying not to cry in public. Brendalyn Hartwick. The tiredness around her eyes was the kind that doesn't come from one bad night, but from many quiet ones in a row. "Sit, please." Sloane sat. Brendalyn didn't waste time. "I want to tell you something before we start. Marcelus has been carrying this whole thing on his own shoulders for 6 months. I don't think that's right. He saw what happened on a monitor. I saw it from 3 feet away. I'm the one who put the wheels in motion. I'd like the story you write to be honest about that. All right? May I record? Please." Brendalyn took a long sip and started. "I grew up in Bakersfield. My mother worked 2 shifts at a packing plant. My father left when I was 9. My mother used to tell me, 'Brendalyn, the world doesn't owe you anything, but it'll respect you if you make yourself look like it should.' I believed her. I built a whole life around it. Department store in Fresno, watch boutique in Beverly Hills. Vandermere 4 years ago. 18 months later, I was running the floor. And you were good at it." "I was excellent at it." She said it without pride. Because I had spent 20 years learning to read people in less than 3 seconds. She turned her mug between her palms. "There's something I haven't told anyone. Every time a person walked into that showroom in worn shoes or a faded shirt, I didn't see them. I saw myself at 14, walking into a department store in Fresno that I had no business being in and getting watched the whole time I was there. The louder my heels were on that marble floor, the more I needed to push that girl back out the door before anyone realized she was still standing inside me. I wasn't pushing those customers away, I was pushing her away." Sloane wrote that down. That morning, Marcelus called me on the radio. I walked over there with my floor smile on. The one we all practiced. The one that says, "I am about to be very polite and very unhelpful." "What did you say to him?" She closed her eyes. I said, "Sir, I think you may be looking for the pre-owned dealership a few blocks east. They have a wider range of price points." She opened her eyes. He turned to me, gave me the smallest, kindest smile back and said, "Thank you, ma'am, but I'm just looking. I appreciate you checking in on me." Do you know what I felt when he said that? I felt angry. His calm was making me feel like the rude one. I had walked up there to put him in his place, and instead he was somehow showing me grace, and I couldn't stand it. She pressed the heel of her hand against her temple. It took me weeks to understand. He wasn't looking down on me. He was giving me a chance to walk away. He was being kind to me. And I was too angry at my own life to recognize kindness when it was being handed to me. Did you know who he was? Not then. I didn't treat him that way because of who he was. I treated him that way because of who I assumed he wasn't. She took another sip. Her hand was steady. And later, when I found out his name, do you know what I felt? I felt sick. Not because I had insulted someone famous. Because I realized I was supposed to feel worse about insulting him than I had felt about insulting all the others. That was the moment I understood I had been a different kind of broken than I knew. What did you do next? I keyed my own radio. I told Marcelus the guest was being non-compliant. I knew exactly what those words would do. I said them anyway. Then I stepped back and I waited for security to come down. She turned back. That was the moment I lit the match. Everything that happened after that, every choice anyone else made, started with the words I said into that radio. I have been carrying that match in my pocket every day since. Sloane closed her notebook. She thanked Brendalyn, paid for both coffees on the way out. She still didn't know what had happened in those 4 minutes from inside the showroom. But she was about to hear them from someone who had been standing right outside the doors, holding a phone. The drive from Pasadena to Long Beach took most of the afternoon. The October sun was sitting low and orange over the rooftops by the time Sloane reached the small apartment building. The woman who opened the door was 68, white hair, a cardigan the color of dried lavender, reading glasses on a beaded chain. "You must be Miss Whitaker. Henrietta Voss." For the past 6 months, she had been quietly known in certain corners of the internet as the woman with the phone. She had never given an interview, When Henrietta returned with 2 cups of tea, she looked at the recorder. "Press the button, dear. People keep telling me I'm the woman who changed everything. I'm not. I'm a retired English teacher with an old phone." Sloane pressed the button. "Mrs. Voss, what were you doing on Lake Boulevard that morning?" "I was going to buy flowers. My daughter Caroline was coming up from San Diego. I'd taken the bus. Got off at the stop in front of that big motorcycle showroom. I'd walked past that building maybe 50 times in my life. I'd never thought about going inside. It wasn't a place for me." She took a sip. "I was just walking. And then the front doors of that showroom flew open. There's a difference between a door that opens and a door that gets thrown open by people who are angry. This was the second kind. What did you see?" 2 security guards came out first, big men walking fast, and between them, sort of half stumbling because they had a hand on each of his arms, was a man in a flannel shirt. He wasn't resisting. Write that down very clearly. He wasn't fighting. He wasn't yelling. They got him out onto the sidewalk, and one of them gave him a small push at the end. Not a hard push, but not a gentle one either. The kind of push you give to make a point. Henrietta was quiet. His backpack had come off one of his shoulders. His wool cap was on the ground. He leaned down very slowly and picked up the cap. Then his backpack. Then a third time, because something else had fallen out. Small leather notebook. He brushed the dust off the cover and put it back in the bag. Then he just stood there, right in the middle of that sidewalk, looking at the door he had just come out of, not angry, not crying, just standing. Sloane was writing slowly. "I thought, that man needs someone to ask if he's all right." I had taken 2 more steps when he turned his head a little, and I saw his face, and I knew exactly who I was looking at. She paused. "I have lived in this country for 68 years. I have seen a lot of unkindness, but I had never in my life seen a man be put on a sidewalk like that, with that much carelessness, by people who could not be bothered to find out his name first." She picked up the iPhone from the table. I started recording. I was thinking, somebody needs to see this. Then I posted it on Facebook. 1 sentence. "I just witnessed something at Vandermere in Belmont Heights, and I do not have words for it." Then I walked over to that man, and I asked him if he was all right. "What did he say?" Henrietta smiled very softly. He said, "Yes, ma'am. Thank you for stopping. That was kind of you." Quiet, simple. Then he stepped to the side, away from the doors, like he didn't want to be in anyone's way. She paused. He wasn't standing there in triumph. He wasn't waiting to call a lawyer. He was just a man on a sidewalk who had been embarrassed and who was trying very hard not to make anyone around him uncomfortable about it. That was the part that broke my heart. Not the way they put him out, the way he stood after, like he didn't want to take up any more room than he had to. Walk me through what happened next. Minute by minute, she took a breath. In the first minute, I didn't do anything. I posted the video and forgot about it. But I had one friend, my grandnephew Caleb, who works as an editor at the Los Angeles Sentinel. His phone notified him that his great-aunt had posted something on Facebook, which had probably never happened before in his life. So he opened it. In the second minute, Caleb watched it twice. The second time, he was sure. He put it on Twitter. This just happened on Lake Boulevard in Belmont Heights. In the third minute, Caleb's tweet started moving. 2 of his followers run very large fan pages. One of them reposted. She has just under 1 million followers. The video crossed 100,000 views before I'd finished asking him if he wanted to sit down on the bench at the bus stop. She paused. Inside the showroom, a customer named Donovan Ashcroft was looking at a Ducati. A producer of some kind. His phone buzzed. His assistant had texted him. "Are you at Vandermere right now? You need to look at Twitter." Donovan turned to the nearest salesperson and said, "Get me Adelina Crestwood now." In the fourth minute, the woman who ran that entire showroom was sitting at her desk on the 3rd floor. Her head of communications burst into her office without knocking. He showed her the video. He said, Mrs. Crestwood, I need you to tell me right now if this is who I think it is. She opened a folder on her desk, a partnership briefing she had been studying for months. She looked at the photograph. She looked at the video. Then she stood up so fast that she knocked over her own coffee cup, and she ran out of her office and down the stairs. A chill moved along Sloane's arms. In the 5th minute, I was sitting on a bench at a bus stop with a man in a flannel shirt. We were talking about whether the bus was running on time. Then I saw, out of the corner of my eye, a woman in a charcoal suit come running out of those front doors in heels that were absolutely not made for running. Henrietta smiled very slightly. She crossed that sidewalk in maybe 10 strides. When she got to him, she did the most remarkable thing. She didn't introduce herself. She didn't give him a business card. She didn't start her apology with the company name. She lowered her head and she said, "Mr. Reeves, I am so deeply sorry. I do not know what to say. Please, please give me a chance to speak with you." Sloane wrote that down, word for word. What did he do? He stood up from the bench. He picked up his backpack. He put his cap on his head. He looked at her with the kindest face I've ever seen on a man, and he said, "Ma'am, I think I was already invited to leave." Then he just stood there, waiting, like he was giving her room to figure out what she wanted to do next. Sloane closed her notebook. "There's one more thing." On the walk back toward the showroom doors, while Adelina was still trying to apologize, I heard him say something to her in a low voice. I was a few steps behind them. My hearing has always been very good. Sloane held her breath. He said, "Mrs. Crestwood, I'd like to talk with you, but I don't want to talk in there. Can we walk for a few minutes, just the two of us?" And she said yes. The two of them walked off down the sidewalk. They were gone for almost 45 minutes. Whatever was said in that walk, I never knew. Nobody ever knew. The only person alive who knows what was said is the woman who was on it with him. Sloane felt her pulse quicken. She thought of the address in Ojai folded inside the back cover of her notebook. She decided. Sloane drove to Ojai on a Saturday morning, 2 weeks later. She got into her car at 6 in the morning, drove north on the 101, and followed the long valley road into the hills until she found the gravel driveway with the small wooden mailbox that bore no name on it, only a number. The woman who came to the door wore a soft yellow cardigan over a white blouse, dark jeans, and gardening gloves still streaked with soil. Silver hair cut short. Miss Whitaker, right on time. Adelina Crestwood, 56, until 6 months ago the chief executive officer of one of the most prestigious luxury motorcycle showrooms on the West Coast. She had not given a single public interview since the morning that ended her career. Sloane followed her around to a small back garden, 2 wooden chairs under an arbor, a tea service waiting on the table. "I read your letter 4 times before I answered it. Most of what I've received in the last 6 months has been requests. Yours was the first one that didn't feel like one." What did it feel like? It felt like a question, from someone who actually wanted to listen to the answer. Sloane set the recorder on the table. "Mrs. Crestwood, I've spoken with Marcelus Thorne, with Brendalyn Hartwick, and with Henrietta Voss. I know most of what happened up until you walked out onto the sidewalk. After that, the public record stops. I am here to ask what was said on that walk." Adelina was quiet for a long moment. She lifted her teacup and looked out at the rose bushes. "You're asking the only question that actually matters." She set her cup down. "I want to start with the moment I came down those stairs. Because everything I tell you about the walk only makes sense if you understand the woman who came down them." Sloane nodded. "When I saw the video, the first thing I felt was not horror, it was not shame, it was professional calculation. This is a problem I can solve if I move fast enough, not a man has been hurt. My first thought was about damage control. Write that down, because everything that happened next was a response to it." Sloane wrote the words down. "I came down the stairs as a CEO. I had calculated before I reached the bottom exactly what I was prepared to offer. A complete apology, the immediate termination of the security director and the floor manager, a press statement, a donation to a charity of his choosing. I was prepared to do anything except the one thing he actually wanted me to do. And what was that? Stop and listen. Adelina took a slow breath. I ran across that sidewalk. I lowered my head. I started listing what I was prepared to do. I'd probably said 3 sentences before he held up one hand and stopped me. He didn't raise his voice. He just said, "Mrs. Crestwood, may I ask you one question before either of us says anything else?" She looked at Sloane, and he asked me, and these are the words I will never forget. "In the 8 months we have been negotiating, have you ever come into your own showroom without telling anyone you were coming, just to see how a regular customer would be treated?" Sloane's pen went still. I stood there on the sidewalk and tried to find an answer that wasn't no. I couldn't find one. The truth was no. I had never done it. Not once. In 4 years as the chief executive of that company, I had never walked through my own front doors as anything other than the boss. I had built an entire performance review system on metrics and reports. I had never simply stood inside my own building and watched. Her voice cracked slightly. He saw it on my face. Then he said very quietly, "I'd like to talk with you, but I don't want to talk in there. Can we walk?" And I said yes. And we walked. Did he speak first? He did. He started talking about his sister. He told me about Kim. He told me she had spent many years fighting leukemia. He told me there was a difference between being looked at by someone who saw a sick woman and being looked at by someone who saw his sister. She turned her teacup between her palms. He said his sister had told him once that she didn't want pity. She didn't want to be looked at like a patient or a survivor. She wanted to be looked at like a person who happened to be alive that day. Sloane wrote that line twice. Then he said, "Inside your showroom just now I was looked at, but I wasn't seen. The man at the door looked at me and saw a problem. The woman on the floor looked at me and saw a mistake. Neither of them saw a person." Adelina paused. I almost defended myself. I almost said, "I never told my employees to treat anyone that way." I caught the words just before they left my mouth, because I realized something. I had never told my employees to treat anyone that way. But I had also never told them not to. I had measured everything about who walked out of that showroom with a purchase. I had measured nothing about how the people who walked out without one had been made to feel. "And what did you say to him?" I said. "You're right." He stopped walking. He turned to face me. He put his hand on my arm, just for a second, very gently, and he said, "Mrs. Crestwood, I'm not telling you this to make you feel bad. I'm telling you because I think you can fix it. I wouldn't be walking with you if I didn't think you could." Sloane felt her own eyes sting unexpectedly. He stopped on a corner and told me what he was going to ask me to do. 3 things. First, the partnership we had been negotiating was not yet dead. He would not punish my entire company for the choices of a few people on a single morning. But he wanted the signing pushed back by 6 months, not as a punishment, as a chance. She held up 2 fingers. Second, he wanted me to start a foundation. He would put $15 million of his own personal money into it as the founding gift, on the condition that my company match it dollar for dollar. The foundation would teach mechanical and technical trades to adult students who hadn't been able to access them through traditional paths. He had a name in mind already: Open Garage. Third, he didn't want me to fire Mr. Thorne or Mrs. Hartwick. He said the easy thing for me to do, the thing my board would demand, was to terminate them both before the close of business. But if I did that, the story would be over for me. It would not be over for them. The only way the cycle stopped was if those 2 people stayed and learned and changed in front of everyone. Adelina looked down at her hands. Then he said the thing I think about most often, "Mrs. Crestwood, I am not asking for any of this because I am owed it. I am asking because I have spent a long time trying to figure out what is actually worth doing in my life. And I have decided that the only thing that has ever mattered is whether people who came across me walked away a little less invisible than they were before. A finch landed on the empty bird feeder, looked around, flew off. What said yes to all three. On a sidewalk in front of a closed storefront, with a man in a flannel shirt who had every right to destroy me and had instead chosen to ask me for something harder. Are the Foundation's results what you hoped for? Her face changed. The careful, measured expression of the executive softened. They are better. In the first 6 months, 312 adult students completed the program. 47 of them are in full-time mechanical employment. 8 have started small repair shops in neighborhoods that didn't have one before. She paused. I drove out to Boyle Heights 3 weeks ago, unannounced. The way I should have walked into my own showroom for 15 years and never did. I sat in the back of the workshop for 2 hours and I watched Marcelus Thorne teach a young woman how to seat a piston ring. I watched her get it wrong. I watched him show her again. I watched her get it right. I watched him give her a small nod. Her voice had dropped, and I cried for about 10 minutes, quietly, into a paper napkin. Because the man teaching her the piston ring was the same man who had pushed an innocent person out of my front door 6 months earlier. And he was a better man, not a different man, a better one. I had spent 30 years in business, never once seeing that happen. I had been told it was impossible. I had been wrong in the most important possible way for 30 years. Sloane was very still. One last thing, Adelina said. Marcelus called me last night. He had a feeling you'd be coming today. This Saturday morning, 8 a.m. open garage. He's going to be there. He hasn't been back since the day we shook hands. You should be there too. Sloane closed her notebook. There's one more piece of this story that none of us has seen yet. Sloane arrived at 7:45 on a Saturday morning in late October. The fog hadn't lifted from the streets of Boyle Heights. The big bay door of the workshop was already rolled up. 80 people had begun to gather, folding chairs in loose rows facing a small wooden platform. Marcelus Thorne was at the back of the workshop, helping a young man set up a folding chair for an older woman who had come with a cane. He said something to her, and she laughed and patted his arm. Sloane watched the way his face changed when she laughed. 6 months ago, she could not have imagined that face on him. Brendalyn Hartwick was at the coffee table, cotton jacket over jeans, white shirt. She was pouring coffee for a man who looked like he had come straight from a third shift somewhere, asking him whether he wanted cream or sugar, waiting for his answer with an attention Sloane recognized. The change was not loud, it was just present. Beside her was a young woman in her early 20s with a single thick braid down her back. Marisol Quintero, a student in the Foundation's first class, hired as a junior instructor the month before. Sloane sat in the back row. She didn't turn on her recorder. At 7:55, a young man walked over to the bench where Marcelus was sitting and took a seat beside him. 22. Lean.
Quick hands.
His name was Theron Briggs, the Foundation's first honors graduate. They didn't speak much. They sat together, watching the room fill. The ease between them was visible from across the room. At 7:58, the side-on door opened. A man in a charcoal grey flannel shirt walked in, alone, a small canvas backpack over one shoulder, the same kind of worn jeans, the same kind of leather work boots. His hair was a little longer now. There was a little more salt in the beard. He held a black wool cap in his hand. The room did not erupt. 80 people had been told in the days leading up to this morning that a particular guest might be coming. They had been asked to receive him the way they would receive anyone else. And they did. Marcelus saw him coming. He stood up slowly, so did Theron. Keanu Reeves did not extend his hand to Marcelus Evans. He extended it to Theron. Mr. Briggs. He was not loud. The people closest grew quiet, and the quiet moved outward through the room in a soft ripple. I've been looking forward to meeting you. Theron took his hand. His hand was shaking. "Sir, it is an honor. You don't have to say anything yet. I came to listen to you, not the other way around." He turned to Marcelus. His face shifted into something quieter. "Mr. Thorne, Mr. Reeves." The two men looked at each other for a long moment. Then Keanu offered his hand. Marcelus took it. The handshake lasted longer than a normal handshake. Neither of them said anything during it. "Glad you came back," Marcelus said. "Glad you stayed," Keanu said. That was all of it. After a few minutes, Marcelus walked to the small wooden platform. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. We have a guest with us this morning who you may recognize. He's asked me not to make a speech about him, so I won't. The thing I want to say is this. Every single person in this room has at some point been looked at by someone who decided what they were before they had a chance to show it. Some of us in this room have done the looking. I have done the looking, and I am still learning how to do it differently. That's the whole job. There is nothing else." He stepped down. There was no applause. People simply listened. Theron stood up and walked to the platform. He looked for a moment, like he might not be able to speak. Then he took a breath. "I want to talk about a flyer. 6 months ago, I was at a bus stop on Whittier Boulevard. I was on my way to my second job. I was thinking about quitting school. I sat down on the bench, I looked over at the pole, and there was a flyer stapled to it. Open garage, free mechanical trades program. Adults 18 and over, no experience required. I tore off one of the strips. I put it in my pocket. I didn't call the number for 2 weeks. I almost didn't call. I'd been told for a long time by a lot of people that programs like this were not for people like me." He looked up. I called anyway. A woman named Marisol answered the phone. She talked to me for 40 minutes. At the end of the call, she said, "Mr. Briggs, we have a class starting in 3 weeks. And I want to say this because it has stayed with me. Nobody had ever called me Mr. Briggs in my whole life. Not a teacher, not a boss, not a clerk at a store. I was 22 years old, and a stranger on a phone was the first person who had ever called me that." His voice grew rough. "The more important thing I learned in this place is that I am a person. Some of you are going to laugh at that, and that's fair because it sounds simple. But for me, it was not simple. I had been treated for a long time like I was a problem someone had to solve before I could move forward. I'd been told in 1,000 small ways to make myself smaller. When I came here, nobody told me that. Nobody." He looked at Marcelus and at Brendalyn and at the man in the flannel shirt. "I want to thank the people who built this place. I've been told that one of them is here this morning and that he prefers I do not name him from this platform, and so I will not. But I will say this to him directly. Sir, you decided a long time ago that someone like me deserved to be called Mr. Briggs by a stranger on a phone. And because you decided that, I am standing on this platform today. Thank you for deciding." He stepped down. The applause this time was long. It wasn't loud, but it didn't stop. When the applause settled, Keanu walked to the platform. He didn't climb onto it. He stood beside it. "Mr. Briggs, I'd like to give you something." He reached into his backpack and took out a plain white envelope. "This is not a motorcycle. I want to be clear about that. What this is a 1-year apprenticeship at the Arch Motorcycle Workshop in Hawthorne. Full pay, full benefits. You'll be working alongside some of the best mechanics in the country. At the end of the year, if you still love it, you'll start building your own first bike. From the frame up, yourself. It will not be a gift. It will be yours because you made it." Theron took the envelope with both hands. He didn't open it. He just held it. "Sir, I will work very hard. I won't waste this." Keanu put his hand briefly on Theron's shoulder. He didn't speak. There was no more program after that. People drifted toward the coffee table. Sloane watched Keanu move through the room, slowly talking with one student and then another. He didn't give a speech. He listened. That was almost all he did. At one point on his way past the coffee table, he stopped beside Brendalyn. They spoke for less than a minute. Sloane saw Brendalyn nod, twice, and she saw the man in the flannel shirt say something that made Brendalyn smile, briefly, in a way Sloane had not seen her smile before. Just before he left, he walked back to where Marcelus was standing near the bay door. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Reeves. Thank you for what you've done here, Mr. Thorne." Marcelus was quiet for a moment. "I owe you an apology I haven't given you yet. I wanted to say it on a sidewalk, but I wasn't ready then. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I treated you the way I had treated a lot of people, and you were the one who was patient enough to make me see all of them." Keanu listened. He didn't interrupt. "I forgave you a long time ago," he said, when Marcelus had finished. "But the part of you that needed to hear yourself say it, that was the part that needed to do the work. And you did it." Marcelus nodded, a tight, careful nod. He extended his hand. Keanu took it. "Take care of yourself, Mr. Thorne." "You too, sir." The man in the flannel shirt walked out through the same side door he had come in through. He didn't look back. He didn't wave. He simply walked, the way he had walked for 45 minutes on a sidewalk in Belmont Heights 6 months earlier, with his hands in his jacket pockets and his eyes on whatever was in front of him next. Sloane stood in the doorway and watched him go. In a workshop in Boyle Heights that night, the lights had been turned off. Marcelus Thorne locked the bay door behind him. He stood for a moment in the gravel lot, with his hand on his car door, looking up at the early stars above the corrugated tin roof. He thought about a sidewalk in Belmont Heights. He thought about a man whose name he had not bothered to ask. He thought about all the others, the hundreds of others, whose names he had also not bothered to ask, and who he would never be able to find now, and to whom he could only offer, in the years he had left, the corrected version of himself. He got in his car, he drove home, and somewhere on the other side of the city, a man in a flannel shirt was already walking into the next room he would not be recognized in, where someone would or would not see him. The choice, as it had always been, was theirs.